Welcome back to the Urban Monk. Dr. Pedram Shojai here to ask some big questions. Someone told me the other day, it was really interesting because, I'm in that age, kind of pre-millennial, whatever the hell you call guys like me, where, I was around when the first Apple computers showed up and, now I run a website. But in this age of Google, really, answers have become free. Answers have become, commodified in a way where it's just like any idiot can Google something on a phone and get the answer. And really, the wisdom is in asking better questions. And so, to me, that's a very profound statement because, all the spiritual training says, ask bigger questions and keep asking questions behind those questions. And so, my guest today is the Dean of Harvard's Graduate School of Education, delivered a kick-ass commencement address that really kind of took a lot of people by storm, and it's really about asking better questions. Book is called Wait, What? And Life's Other Essential Questions. And today we have James Ryan hanging out with us, and we're going to ask bigger and better questions. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm delighted to be here.
So what year was this commencement address that got so much hoopla over at Harvard?
It was just last year.
It was last year.
Spring.
Yeah, excellent. And what drove you, had you been already, I'm assuming you'd been in the work that you're doing here, and then did you just kind of take the top line kind of wisdom of that work and deliver it in that commencement speech?
Well, no, it's funny you say that. I have to give a commencement speech every year because I'm the dean, and this was my third speech, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to talk about, and I started to get questions from friends about what are you going to talk about this year. The first year I talked about time, which was not very original, and then the next year I talked about the sin of omission, which has always been a fascination of mine. And so when people ask me about last year's speech, I said, well, that's a good question. I'm not sure. And then I realized when I was on a run one morning that talking about questions would actually be a good topic because I've been obsessed with questions most of my life.
So questions, so there's the Socratic method, right? And there's a lot of ways of questioning. What drove you into being obsessed with questions?
I think it was just curiosity, and then I think I had a natural inclination to be Socratic. So I think, like most kids, I was curious, and so asked a lot of why questions. But as I got older, I would ask my parents a lot of questions, probing at their beliefs. And I remember a lot of question-filled dinner conversations with my poor parents, where I grilled them on questions large and small. And I remember my dad telling me that I had better become a lawyer because he couldn't imagine me doing anything else. I had no practical skills at all, unlike him. And I ultimately followed his advice and went to law school and then ultimately became a law professor, in part because I think it was the one job I was well suited for because I liked asking questions.
Amazing. So you played to your strength. I'm sure your parents must have been so exhilarated when they got why questions about everything. But
Yeah, right. My dad used to always tell me that life is not a great debate.
Yeah.
And that it's not so important to be right, which was his way of saying stop the question.
Enough. Right. Enough.
Yeah.
I got my eldest, my son is that way, and it's just it really keeps you on your toes as a parent, man. It's just like wow. That is a good question, and Daddy's late for something right now, and you're asking me to stop and dig.
Right.
So
Well, I've had payback with my own 4 kids who have asked me a lot of questions along the way.
So karma is what it is, right? It's back. So you got life's 5 essential questions that you're talking about in this book, and I'd like to get into them. The first one really revolves around the title of the book, Wait, What? So let's, what is wait what? Like how do we get into these essential questions with that first kind of stop, pause statement?
Yeah. So as I was writing the speech and thinking about it, I thought rather than talk just in the abstract about the importance of asking good questions, I would try to give examples of questions that I thought were really important and useful in all sorts of contexts, which led to these 5 questions. And I started with wait, what? In part because it's a question that my kids ask all the time. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought it's an incredibly important question, in part because it is really a question that is asking the person who's speaking to slow down, to make sure that you understand what they're saying. And I think that this is absolutely critical. I mean, I feel like we too often rush to judgment. Too often we feel like we understand something before we truly do. And so the fact that the question is asked, wait, what, rather than simply what, to me is sort of a great way of signaling that you want someone to slow down and explain what they're saying because you really want to understand what they're saying.
Interesting. Yeah, because when I hear that, I think, I visualize a teenager, right? That's such a teenage thing. Wait,
Right.
what? Right?
Right.
But there's
Right.
something also very respectful in that I know so many people that will be given an answer and then just simply nod their head and pretend they understood, partially because they don't care, partially because they don't want to look dumb, partially because what, right? But what that does
Right.
is it just ends the inquiry right there. There is no exchange of ideas or information. There's just, the conversation is lost to some, dynamic interpersonal drama or whatever it is that keeps that conversation from going. So it's perfectly appropriate here to stop someone and say, hey, what are you saying? What do you mean? I want to understand.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it doesn't have to be accusatory either. I mean, it can be respectful and a sign that you are genuinely interested in understanding what someone else is saying. And I think it's really useful to avoid needless conflict, to be honest. I mean, too often we get into arguments because we assume we understand what someone was saying before actually understanding. And if before you advocate for a position one way or another, if you ask someone to explain their argument or explain their position, you'll often find that you have more common ground than you might have thought at first blush.
There's also, the climate we live in right now where everything's so damn polarized, right? Where, people are just waiting to attack each other's positions without hearing. And, black and white and gray is where all the good stuff happens. It's fascinating to me that there isn't more of this, right, in our culture. And just stopping to really ask, because one of the most respectful things you can do is ask somebody to speak where they're coming from, because most people are so busy being disrespected and cut off that it's one of the easiest ways to honor somebody and really open up a conversation, and just good people skills.
I totally agree. We're at a time, like you said, of great polarization, and there is an awful lot of discussion about how to have conversations, how to bridge the various divides that plague our country. And it seems to me a really good way to start a conversation is by asking some questions and asking a version of wait what. I mean, wait what is a proxy for asking someone to explain. Asking someone a version of wait what is in a sense inviting them to tell you their story. And you're right that is a great way to create a bond and to start building bridges. And it's an incredibly respectful thing to ask someone to tell you their story.
Some of the best conversationalists I know are people that will empty themselves and allow the person across from them to just genuinely express. And even if it's for 30 seconds, man, it really starts to create a human bond in a way that I think is missing on the streets of America right now. So
I think you're exactly right. I couldn't agree with you more. And you can also tell when someone's asking you a question that's sincere and they really want to hear the answer. My wife and I will often debrief after we're at a cocktail party or something like that, and we always notice when we're talking to someone who hasn't asked us a single question.
It's funny. And then the people that are on stage selling themselves the entire time, waiting for you to shut up so they could keep talking.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, basic conversation skills. Actually, you're in Boston. You're in Boston, right? You're at Harvard right now.
Yeah.
And so, like, every time I go to Manhattan, or I do a fair amount of like Ubering around. Now switching over to Lyft. Here it's just I want to know who this person is for a second. Tell me, or and you giving someone an opportunity to shine and share wisdom creates human connection in ways that most of us have lost. right? We don't talk to
Right.
people. So
Right.
that's okay. So that's the root of all understanding, is that first question. And then you jump into the heart of all curiosity with another question.
Right.
Your second question. Yep.
Yeah. So the second question is, I wonder, which I recognize is not a full question, but it can be paired with why. So I wonder why, or it can be paired with if. So I wonder if. And asking I wonder why, I think, is a way to remain curious about the world. And this is a question that you can ask others, but I think in some ways it's just as important, if not more so, to ask it yourself. I mean, I think a lot of us, as we grow older, we start our lives by asking why all the time. And then as we grow older, we fall out of the habit. And so you could say that curious people ask why, but I think if you ask yourself or remind yourself to ask, I wonder why, it's a good way to remain curious. So instead of just looking around and assuming, things have always been the way they are, or not pausing to notice something mysterious, or again, not pausing to ask someone who sits next to you a question, I think prompting yourself to ask, I wonder why, is a good way to remain curious.
It reminds me of the old Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, classic.
That's one of my favorite books. It is absolutely one of my favorite books. I think the only book I've read cover to cover twice.
Wow. Yeah, it is amazing. First time I read it, I was too young and it was too dense, and I hadn't crystallized enough drama in my psyche yet. And then when I started to understand kind of the crystalline matrix of what starts to gel in this personality and this worldview that then just becomes this kind of prison of who you think you are, right? And all that comes from not wondering anymore. So it's just it really invoked that for me. Just reading this bit in your book, because that why pierces through all of that and really keeps creating kind of an expansive worldview that allows you to be in that wonderment of the Zen mind.
Right. It's so funny that you mentioned that book, because I think about it all the time. And the image that sticks with me from that book is the tug at the sleeve, where he talks about paying attention to the tug at your sleeve. And in a way, that is a message of asking why. So being curious, not ignoring something that is bothering you but is not screaming in your face that you should pay attention, but something that's nudging at you. And if you pause to ask, I wonder why I'm feeling tugged this way, you're likely to explore and then discover what it is that's tugging at your sleeve.
It's funny, is so many people in our culture right now are looking for meaning and looking for purpose and going to like workshops and trying to figure all this shit out, right? And at the same time, they've unlearned the ability to follow the breadcrumbs that are right in front of them, right? And all these little things that are there are just, powerful lessons like waiting to be unpacked, and that curiosity is really the door that you step through to get there. And so when you start doing this, what you've been teaching you're with young students, or you're at the graduate school of education, so a little older students of this. Are you working this methodology into how they approach their curriculum, their teaching, their lives?
Well, so I started as a law professor, and now I don't teach as much as I did because I'm the dean, and my day job keeps me out of the classroom more than I would like, frankly. But when I started law school, the very first class I had, very first day of law school, this old law professor, a great Southern gentleman, said to all of us, there's one all-important question in law school, and it's a question you should always ask yourself. It's a 3-letter question, and the question is why? And he went on to explain that is the way to drill down, to truly try to understand something, is to ask why. Why was a case decided this way? Why was an argument posed this way? And I think that question can just as easily be asked in the context of an education school. And in some ways, when you're asking a student to defend a particular proposition or an argument, you're asking them, well, why do you feel that way? Why would you make that argument? Why would you say that? So yeah, I think it's absolutely critical. And then I also think trying to engender that same kind of attitude in your students, to get them to ask why, is one of the best lessons you can pass along.
Yeah.
and one of the best habits.
Yeah, and something I would probably add to that is, you have so much of these program mimetics that are coming through the media right now and through the political systems and all these kinds of things. And so a lot of times I'll talk to someone who has some sort of position they're taking on something, and just asking the question why really kind of stumps them, because they don't actually know why. They haven't explored their position at all.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I mean, asking someone why they hold a particular view is a great way to force someone to think about it, and that's really useful for students. But I also think, to go back to our earlier conversation, asking someone, why do you have that particular view, in a respectful way, is again a decent way of trying to bridge a divide. So why, someone who has a different view of life or a different view of politics, instead of assuming that they must be ignorant or they must be evil, right, which is what we often do when we come across someone whose views are very different from our own, ask, well, why would you believe that, or why do you believe that? And you might be surprised by what you learn.
And I think that we are in dire need of more of that right now in our country and the world, right? It's just that basic kind of human probing into figuring out what your position is. Because I think a lot of these positions are contrived. Most people are in some camp because they need to belong, and it's more animal brain than individual brain. So, that to me is huge. And curiosity, man, if curiosity to make a comeback, that would be
Right. Yeah, no, I know. The cats might be upset, but everyone else would be happy.
That's funny. So next one, beginning of all progress is kind of the question number 3. How do we get into that question?
Yeah. So this question is, couldn't we at least? And again, I wonder, it's the beginning of a series of questions rather than a single complete question. But it is a series of questions that I think help you get unstuck, help you get started, help you find consensus. So couldn't we at least agree? Or couldn't we at least begin? And the reason why I think this question is so useful, and it's a question I can tell you I ask all the time, is because progress is often halted because we're waiting for a perfect solution, or progress is often halted because we spend too much time focusing on where we disagree and not enough time focusing on where we agree. And so if you think to pull this question out when you're stalled in making a plan, or you're stalled in a discussion, and you just ask, well, couldn't we at least agree on these basic principles? Or couldn't we at least just get started on this, even if we're not sure where it's going to end up? I find that is often a really great way to get unstuck and to actually make some progress. You may not know where you're going to end up, but if you at least agree to get started, I mean, oftentimes the hardest thing in life is to just get started, whether you're talking about going for a run, or whether you're talking about starting a multi-year project at work, or going on a long trip.
Okay, so in the context of, working in some sort of kind of bipartisan conversation or something, find some common ground, couldn't we at least agree? Then you have some conversation rolling, then you have some camaraderie building, you build some human capital, some human relationships, and you move forward with that. How would I apply that in my personal life? Say, I'm 40 pounds overweight and I'm just trying to run out of excuses to get going on something.
Right. Well, you might say, well, couldn't I at least get started by planning to exercise for 10 minutes a day for the next 5 days? Or couldn't I at least get started on eating a little bit more healthily than I have before, and not feel like you have to plan out your whole exercise plan, your whole diet plan, but just commit to getting started, understanding that if you commit to getting started, it was Mary Poppins who said, "A job begun is a job half done." I mean, she had magical powers, so it was easy for her to say. But I do think that actually getting started is often at least half the battle.
Interesting. So we're talking about setting up micro behavioral change and setting up some sort of quick incremental progress to get the ball rolling. Because, look, as you say, look, you know what, I'm not going to go do a boot camp this week, but let me just walk up and down the stairs, and then that becomes your negotiated position into a new way of going.
I think that's a really nice way to put it. Yeah, and I think that I actually you would surely know better than I about this, but my sense is that that's a pretty effective way to get started on something. More effective, I would bet, than starting out with really ambitious, completely thought through goals that once you fall short of them, you feel like, okay, well, I tried that and it's not going to work. But if you start by saying, well, I don't know what I'm going to do next week, but I know, this week, 5 days of it, I'm going to walk 10 minutes a day.
That's it. And you know what? You look at all the studies, you look at the work of B.J. Fogg over at Stanford and all these kind of behavior labs out there. It's really just that, right? Because, the farce out there is that you're sitting on your ass and then you go do some sort of like CrossFit boot camp and you have six-pack abs within 3 months. And everyone, they hurt themselves, they fail, they prove to themselves that they can't do it. It becomes a kind of a negative spiral. So this is really kind of like behavior change 101 is, where do I start?
Right.
So couldn't we at least walk up the stairs? Couldn't we at least, eat a breakfast and have less dinner or whatever it is?
Right.
Love that.
Right. Well, I also think it's a decent question to ask to help you overcome fear. This is a question I use with my kids a lot when they were younger, and they were worried about or resistant to do something. Instead of asking them to actually do it, I would ask them a version of, well, couldn't we at least walk up to it? So when I was teaching my kids to ski, which now they love to do. When they were really young, they were really nervous about going on a chairlift. So I asked them, well, couldn't we at least go over and take a closer look? Not, well, let's just go up the chairlift and, you'll get over it. But couldn't we at least just go take a look? And that was enough to get them to realize, okay, it's not threatening to me to go look at a chairlift. And once they took a look, it didn't seem so frightening. It doesn't always work, but it's still, again, the idea is you pick a smaller goal that you feel like you can reach that is then hopefully going to lead to achieving larger goals.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And that's really it, is people build such mountains around their larger goals that they're insurmountable. You get to the point where like I'm not going up there, right? So you don't do Everest first. You just climb your local hill, right? And eventually you get there. And so and I've seen that like thousands and thousands of times. We have thousands of people in our community that do these things called gongs, which is a 100-day practice. And it's not like run a marathon every day. It's just do a little something for yourself every day, right? And in doing so, all of a sudden you see huge quantum leaps in people's lives because, once you've proven that you can do this little thing and you have a win under your belt, then you're like, what else can I do?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Love that. Question number 4, how can I help?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah.
So this question, I think it's really important because obviously helping others is one of the most noble gestures you can make. But I also think it's important to think about how you help others. And I think too often there is a sense of what some people call the savior complex. So you have a desire to help someone less fortunate than yourself. And that's like I said, a noble gesture, but you might think that you know exactly what that person needs, and you might view yourself as the hero who's going to come in and change that person's life. If instead you think about asking whomever you wish to help, how can I help? You're offering that person an opportunity to actually tell you, and offering that person the opportunity to remain the expert in his or her own life. And that person might tell you, well, there is actually nothing you can do, which would be fine to know, but it's also an opportunity to form a connection with someone and to help them in a way that recognizes that it's a reciprocal relationship. That is, you are just as likely, I found anyway, you are just as likely to be helped in many ways by anyone you're trying to lend a hand to.
What's interesting is if you lead with that and you mean it, everything in life gets so much better, right? It's like I've had people come in for this tit for tat exchange, right? And you could see it's contrived, but if you actually mean it, it is so heartwarming to have someone genuinely offer their help. And it's rare. It's odd that it's rare, but it's rare in our culture.
Right. And again, if you're sincere about it, and you're actually sincere by asking, well, how can I help? You're right. I think that everything is easier after that, because people understand that if you're going to ask that sincerely, and you're going to ask it in that way, you actually do care. You care enough to not only help, but you care enough to be respectful about the other person. It's also useful, I think, for prompting people to figure out for themselves what the problem is and name the problem, so that if you can help, they can tell you how, right? So I ask this question of my kids who might be complaining about homework, and instead of saying, well, let me take a look, and not that I could help them with their math homework once they were beyond second grade, I will ask them, well, how can I help? And that forces them to think about what the real problem is and whether I can actually help or not.
That's funny. It's just one three-letter word again. Why was the first one, and now we're on how. But that how becomes such a different kicker into the sentence, because it's once you ask how can I help, it's interesting because the presupposition is that already that I'm in, right? I'm here to help, right? And so you already have my support there. So now I need you to tell me how, and that again that leads to a much deeper inquiry into the problem.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's right. So often people will say as a sort of throwaway line, well, let me know if I can help. Right? You hear that all the time. Well, let me know if there's anything I can do. Let me know if I can help. And it's sort of a signal that you don't expect that you're going to hear from the person. But if instead you look at someone and you just ask them, well, how can I help?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
That is a very different way of entering into the conversation, and sometimes in entering into a relationship.
Yeah. What's interesting is you're really kind of on the cutting edge of linguistics here. And really, I mean, we're not really asking questions that are different than what we hear in our lexicon, but it is really important how some of these things are framed and sequenced with very specific qualifiers, right, in the sentence that really does change everything, right? Can I help, or, let me know if I can help versus how can I help is night and day, because there's a lot of buy-in with how can I help.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm delighted to hear I'm on the cutting edge of linguistics. It's the first time I've been told that.
Yeah. No, it's really good because I think the lexicon has changed in such a way where most of us are just most sentences are throwaway sentences, and no one really thinks about the core of what they're saying.
Nice point.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so you get into the origins of words and sentence structure, and some of the most intelligent people have very, very methodical sentence structure. And you know that what they're saying, their meaning, and it's well thought through. And so slowing down a little bit to say something the right way makes a big difference. And I notice that in people a lot, right?
That's a really nice point. I think you're right. So it is a difference between a line that has become a throwaway and a sort of a signal as a throwaway. Let me know if I can help, versus how can I help, which breaks through the typical line that is a throwaway line. Yeah, no, I think that's a really powerful observation.
Yeah, thank you. And so you put your hand on someone's shoulder, you look them in the eyes, you ask that question. It is a night and day difference, right?
Right.
Yeah, you are now connected to a human being across from you. So I really do appreciate that. And so number 5, your question is, what truly matters?
Yeah. So this question is one that ought to be obvious on any list of essential questions. But it's one that I don't think we ask often enough. And by that I mean, it's not just a question that you would ask when you're on vacation and taking stock of your life, or although you can, or when you're thinking about getting married, at these momentous occasions in your life. It's certainly useful for that, but it's also useful on a more day-to-day basis. I mean, to ask yourself on a daily basis, okay, what truly matters today? What do I actually need to accomplish? And why do I want to accomplish what it is that I'm trying to set out? Like, what do I ultimately want to get out of this day? And I don't think we ask ourselves that question nearly enough. We get involved in routines. We rarely ask why we're spending our time in the way that we are, and we just sort of go along and then wonder, like, why one day after another has not been that satisfying. And if instead we ask, well, what truly matters? Not just about the big decisions, which is obviously really important, but about the sort of small decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis.
It's funny, I have a few people in the kind of business efficiency realm, who are always kind of taking all these workshops and all that. And, I got guys like on the C level, like CEO level guys that are like, okay, I'm only allowed to do one thing today.
Yeah.
What's it going to be, right? And really making you ask that question. It's like, it's not a refinery, it's a distillery, right? It's distilling like your ultimate best use of time into that one thing. Now that one thing might be 5 things for someone else, but what is that, right? Where's your energy best served, and where's your highest leverage?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And it is really useful. I mean, to get back to the other set of issues, I think it is really useful, obviously, to ask that about the bigger questions as well, right? So I think asking what truly matters instead of making New Year's resolutions is not a bad practice, right? So you once a year decide, okay, I'm going to take stock of my life and ask what truly matters. And I think what you would find is there's a lot of commonality across the answers. People would typically, I would assume, answer, well, family, friends, being satisfied at work, being kind. But you have to probe a little bit more and start asking, okay, well, what about family? What about friends? What about work truly matters to me? And am I acting in a way that's consistent with what's most important to me?
And so getting granular and saying, so saying family is important is such a throwaway sentence again, right? Like everyone's going to say that, or else you sound like an asshole, right?
Right, exactly. So yeah, it's to get beyond. So yeah, of course, my kids truly matter to me. No, that's not where you stop, right? So what truly matters to me with respect to my kids is that I am able to spend time with them, right? And that I'm able to be involved in their lives, and that I understand what they're going through at school in any given week. That's a very different orientation, and gives you a lot more direction about how you should be spending your time, rather than simply saying, "Oh yeah, of course my kids are important to me. They truly matter to me."
It's funny, I had a moment with my son when I think he was probably like 2 or something at the time. And we were in the middle of a movie launch, and I was just banging away on my laptop working from home one day. And he's just getting more and more fussy and just more and more ornery. And he's like grabbing at the laptop and trying to hit my keys. And I just, I finally just stopped, and I'm like, dude, stop, right? And I looked at him, and he's just looking back at me and I just got it in that moment. It's like I was telling him that whatever's on this laptop is more important to me than him.
Right.
And it was this real make or break moment where I just like closed the laptop and was just like, I'm so sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, so I think that's a wonderful story, and it took me longer than it took you to make the realization that kids want to talk to you on their time, not on your time. And you need to recognize that. And if you want to have serious conversations with your kids, if they come in and interrupt you in the middle of something, and it's clear they want to talk about something serious, you don't tell them, well, let's talk about it later.
It's moved on. Yeah, they live in the now. They're in that mood, that emotion, all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so if your stated goal is to spend quality time with your family, what qualifies as quality time with your family, and when's the last time you did it?
Right. Yeah. No, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
And that's hard. That's hard for a lot of people to reconcile, because it's easy to make those throwaway statements, right? I care about the environment. Okay. You know, what have you done for the environment? What are you reducing in your carbon footprint? You know, I care about my family. Well, what do you do with them? And so these are, you know, these are easy things to say, harder things to be present with. And so I love the inquiry. I love the questions, because the questions don't really have answers. They have more and more questions behind them.
Right, right, yeah. And again, I think there are questions that are useful to ask all the time and across a number of contexts. And you're right, not everyone's going to have the same answer, obviously. But if you ask the questions regularly and you answer them honestly and specifically, I think they're a really useful guide to living a more fulfilling life, frankly.
Well, and also, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, I mean, answers change, right? I could ask the same question year after year and get a very different answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's again why, you know, I think it's not a bad habit to ask yourself at least once a year. It doesn't have to be on New Year's Eve, but ask yourself at least once a year, what truly matters to me. And you're right, it's going to change from when you're 25 to when you're 55.
Yeah, yeah. And what I see all too often in people who now have their personalities kind of crystallized, as you will, is they may have asked a question in their 20s or 30s and come up with an answer that's now become like, you know, the thing they're wearing on their sleeve, and it's gone unquestioned for 3 decades.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's a good way to force yourself to question assumptions as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's like in everything else, it's like you have these iterative processes in business, and you're always kind of looking to grow and adapt and learn and pressure test things. But we don't do it with our own personalities. We don't do it with our own fundamental beliefs. We don't do it with things that matter the most in our personal lives, and those things are what affect everything else. You know, from our marriages to our children to our careers. And so, yeah, I really appreciate this perspective. The book is called Wait What by James Ryan. You know, it's a quick read, it's a delightful read, and it's a great little book, and I highly recommend getting your hands on it and just building questions into your operating system, having an orientation towards inquiry that's driven by questions that allow you to kind of unpack and open up to inner truths that are just right there underneath the surface, but it's just so counter our current culture to do these types of things. And I think this is really, you know, the energy we need to kind of come back to our humanity. We've lost the script a little bit, and so I really appreciate the language. It's not all hippy dippy. It's very, you know, it's you know, so you get a lot of like self-help things that try to go there, but they're hard to follow, right? So you've got a really easy, simple format for this that gets you to the, you know, the intended inquiry, which is, I think, the most important piece in all of it.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I was not aiming for hippy dippy, so I'm glad to hear that.
It's like I'm wearing a collared shirt at Harvard, man. You know, we all got to stay in our lanes. That's it. Hey, listen, thank you so much. Good luck with the book. I think this is great, and you know, I'm gonna follow your progress. I like the work that you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Cheers. Thank you. Let me know what you think. I will see you next time on The Urban Monk.